Everyone knows the story of Daniel in the lion's den, but this is the story of the fire that forged him. He went to bed a prince and woke up a prisoner of war. How does a boy, stripped of his home, his name, and his future, bring the most powerful empire on earth to its knees? Stay with me, and you will discover that the secret to breaking the chains of an empire is not a weapon, but a whisper. Faith is easy in a palace. This is a story about what's left when the palace turns to ash. But before the whisper, there was a voice. Before the prisoner, there was a prince. Our story does not begin in the ashes, but in a world of fragile hope. Daniel was born in Jerusalem during the reign of the good King Josiah, a time of spiritual renewal. His family was of noble, if not royal, blood. His father, a respected counselor in the king's court, a man who had seen the rediscovery of the law and championed the return to God. His mother, a woman of deep faith, who rocked him to sleep with the stories of Abraham, Joseph, and Moses. His childhood was one of sacred duty and intellectual rigor in the sunlit courtyards of the upper city. He studied the Torah, the Psalms, and the words of the prophets, including his contemporary Jeremiah, whose warnings of Babylonian conquest echoed through the city like thunder before a storm. This world of faith and learning, shadowed by the ever-present threat of war, was the world that forged him. And then the thunder arrived. The siege was a slow strangulation. For months the people of Jerusalem starved, watching from the walls as the unstoppable war machine of Nebuchadnezzar assembled on the plains. They saw the construction of siege towers that scraped the sky and battering rams that seemed to hunger for the city gates. The end came with a terrible splintering of wood and stone. The northern wall was breached at midnight. The sounds of the city changed from the cries of the hungry to the screams of the dying. The air grew thick with the metallic scent of blood and the choking dust of shattered limestone. The disciplined tramp of Babylonian infantry echoed in the narrow streets, a death knell for the city of David. The heavy oak door of Daniel's family home splintered, giving way to hulking figures silhouetted against the fires of their own burning city. A Babylonian captain, his beard braided with gold rings, pointed a bronze-tipped spear not at Daniel, but at his father. There were no negotiations. The men of the house were struck down or bound. The women were seized. Daniel watched, helpless, as the world of his youth was dismantled in minutes by loud, brutal foreign hands. A rough sack was thrown over his head, and he was dragged from his home, the last sound he heard being his mother's cry. He was thrown into a holding pen with other young men of noble birth, a collection of the city's finest, now treated like cattle. Among them he found his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their reunion was not one of comfort, but of shared, silent terror. They were now property of the empire. The transportation to Babylon was not a journey. It was an ordeal, a forced march of over 800 kilometers, designed to break the body and crush the soul. The days bled into a merciless rhythm of sun and sand. The march was a moving funeral procession for a nation, snaking from the familiar hills of Judah into the vast, unforgiving desert. Water was rationed, a luxury measured in sips that barely wet the tongue. The weak who fell were left behind for the jackals. At night, the cold desert air offered no comfort, only the sounds of weeping and the whips of the guards. Through it all, Daniel and his 3 friends formed a small island of support, sharing what little they had, offering a steadying arm, a whispered word of encouragement from the scriptures they knew by heart. They learned that survival would depend not just on strength, but on brotherhood. And then, after weeks of endless brown wasteland, through the haze of heat and dust, it rose from the plains like a mirage forged by gods and madness. Babylon. The sheer scale of it was an act of psychological warfare. The outer walls were so thick, chariot races were held on top of them. And at its heart, the Ishtar Gate, a river of brilliant blue glaze that flowed with menacing images of dragons and bulls, its size a deliberate statement. You are nothing. We are everything. They were marched through those gates, their senses overwhelmed. The city was a riot of noise, of strange music, of 1,000 languages, the scent of exotic spices mixed with the filth of a metropolis. They saw ziggurats that clawed at the sky and hanging gardens that cascaded down man-made mountains. They were processed in a vast courtyard under the scrutinizing eye of a high official named Ashpenaz. He walked the lines of captives, assessing them like a horse trader, checking their teeth, their posture, their eyes. He was looking for unblemished youths, intelligent and quick to learn. Daniel and his friends, despite their ordeal, still possessed the bearing of their noble birth. Ashpenaz selected them, separating them from the rest. They were to be indoctrinated, remade in the image of their conquerors. They were taken to the palace, scrubbed clean of the desert, and clothed in fine Babylonian linen. They were enrolled in the King's Academy, a 3-year immersion into the literature, language, and culture of the empire. And they were given new names. Daniel, God is my judge, was now Belteshazzar. The message was absolute. Your old life, your people, your God. They are all dead. You belong to Babylon now. Their first test arrives on a platter. The king's food and wine, consecrated to pagan idols. To partake is the first compromise. Drawing on the conviction of his upbringing, Daniel proposes a different path, a quiet refusal. He asks only for vegetables and water. A 10-day trial is granted. The result is undeniable. The 4 young men appear healthier, their minds sharper than all others. The first whisper of defiance has been heard. He will be in Babylon, but not of Babylon. He has passed the test of integrity, but a far greater trial is brewing in the troubled mind of the king. A greater trial was brewing. King Nebuchadnezzar is haunted by a dream. He makes an impossible demand of his wise men. Tell me the dream and its meaning. Their failure ignites his fury. He signs their death warrant, and with it, Daniel's. Daniel, with a strange calm, requests one night. The 4 friends pray, and in the darkness, heaven opens. Daniel sees a colossal statue of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay, representing a succession of empires. He sees a stone, cut by no human hand, smash the statue and grow into a mountain that fills the earth. He is brought before the throne. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, he says. He describes the dream, and the king is stunned. He then delivers the interpretation. You, O king, are the head of gold, but your empire, and all human empires that follow, are transient. But the stone represents a final kingdom, established by God, that will never be destroyed. The great king falls on his face and worships Daniel's God. Daniel is elevated to the highest office, but power in Babylon is a fragile throne. The king, in an act of supreme arrogance, builds a 90-foot golden statue and commands all to worship it. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it is a line they will not cross.
Even if he does not, we will not serve your gods.
Their refusal brings them before a furious Nebuchadnezzar. Their reply is legendary. The God we serve is able to deliver us, but even if he does not, we will not serve your gods. They are thrown into a furnace heated 7 times hotter, yet the king leaps to his feet in terror. Look, I see 4 men walking in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. They emerge without a single hair singed. The whisper has become a roar. Years pass. Nebuchadnezzar has another dream of a great tree cut down. Daniel, with a heavy heart, explains the tree is the king. For his pride, he will be driven into the wilderness to live like a beast, until he acknowledges God's sovereignty. A year later, the prophecy strikes. The king's sanity vanishes, and for 7 years he is a madman, until he lifts his eyes to heaven in humility, and his kingdom is restored. Decades later, Nebuchadnezzar is dead. His grandson, Belshazzar, holds a great feast. drinking from the sacred goblets looted from Jerusalem's temple. In that instant, a disembodied hand appears and writes on the palace wall, Men, Tekel, Parsin. A terrified Belshazzar summons Daniel, now an old man. Daniel reads the judgment. God has numbered your reign and ended it. You have been weighed and found wanting. Your kingdom is given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, the armies of Persia breach the walls. Belshazzar is slain. Under the new king, Darius the Mede, Daniel's integrity again sees him promoted, but it inspires a venomous jealousy. His enemies trick Darius into signing an irrevocable decree. Anyone who prays to any god or man other than the king for 30 days will be thrown to the lions. Daniel hears the law and does not change his routine. He goes to his upper room, opens the windows that face Jerusalem, and prays. He is arrested. A heartbroken Darius, trapped by his own law, has no choice. Daniel is cast into the den. In the darkness, he is at peace. The lions are silenced by an unseen hand. At dawn, a tormented king rushes to the den and cries out. A voice returns, calm and strong. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. Daniel is brought out, unharmed. His story does not end with his survival. In his final years, he is given a series of profound, complex visions about the future. He sees the sweep of history, and it overwhelms him. And here, we find the answer. The payoff. How did a boy conquer an empire? Daniel's life reveals that true power is not found in a throne room, but in a prayer room. His integrity, forged in a devout home in Jerusalem, was his armor. His consistency was his weapon. He never led an army. He simply lived a life of unwavering faithfulness. He outlasted kings and kingdoms not by fighting them, but by serving them with excellence while worshiping God with exclusive devotion. The whisper of a boy's quiet no to the king's wine became the roar of God's power in a fiery furnace, and the divine silence in a den of lions. Daniel's entire life was an anchor point in the churning river of history, proving that empires are temporary and their glory turns to dust. But the character of a person faithful to God and the kingdom to which they belong, that is the stone cut without hands. That is the mountain that fills the earth. That is what endures forever.